In this Lightroom video, we're going to take a look at some of the best tools for boosting colors and adding punch to your photos. Now, this is my starting image here, so you can see it's looking rather flat and lifeless, but with a few simple adjustments in Lightroom, we can come up with an image that has much more impact. So let's get cracking. So working in Lightroom's develop module here, the first thing we can do is bring up our panels to the right here. And before we do anything else, it's worth looking at our profile browser. Here we can click the grid at the top of the basic panel here to open up the profile browser. Now, if you're working on a raw file, you'll have access to two very useful sets of profiles here. First, there's the Adobe RAW set, and these offer really useful starting points for further edits. So you can see we can hover over these different profiles, and we could perhaps choose the Adobe Vivid profile, which if I hover over it, just boosts the image and adds a bit of punch. Below this, we have the camera matching set of profiles. And again, this is only available if you're working on a RAW file. Now, these are a set of profiles that match the picture styles in your cameras. So because this was shot on a Nikon camera, we have these Nikon picture styles to work with. Again, we have a Vivid profile here that could work quite nicely. But in this case, I'm going to use the Adobe Vivid profile. I can double click to choose that profile and close the profile browser. Then we can go on to adjust the image using these sliders here in the basic panel. And the first thing I'm going to do here, before I start adjusting the colors, I just want to make sure that my whites and blacks are set correctly. So I can hold Alt and drag either of these sliders for a view that shows clipped pixels. So I can hold Alt and drag the blacks, and I want to drag to a point where I start to see areas begin to appear, and these are going to be areas that are clipped to pure black. So I'll drag it to a point just where those clipped pixels begin to appear. I'll do the same with the whites here, and I can drag that to the right to a point just before those clipped whites begin to appear. So now I know I'm making use of the full tonal range from black to white without clipping any of those pixels. Now, if we go down to the presence settings here, we have two very useful sliders here for boosting colors in our image. We have vibrance and saturation. Now, saturation will target and adjust all of the colors at the same time. So you can see I can increase saturation, and that gives me a boost in colors, or I can decrease to desaturate the image, and I can double click any slider to reset it. Now, vibrance is slightly different. It targets the weaker colors in the image. So you can see as I drag vibrance, we're targeting those weaker colors, which are the blues here in the flower, without affecting the greens in the background so much. So you might want to experiment with different combinations of vibrance and saturation. Sometimes you can even get some nice effects by increasing vibrance and decreasing saturation, or the other way around. But in this case, I'm going to add a touch of saturation, and I'm going to use a stronger vibrance value like that. And now I'm really starting to see those colors pop. But if we want to add a bit more impact, we can increase the contrast, and increasing contrast will also boost color saturation. Now we have the contrast slider here. You can see I can drag that upwards to increase the contrast if I like. I prefer to use the tone curve for my contrast control. So we're going to open up the tone curve panel, and I'm just going to plot an S-shaped curve like this by dragging 2 points on my curve line, and you can see how that just adds extra punch to my image. And the stronger the S shape, the more contrasty the image becomes. I'm going to keep it fairly shallow here because I think we've got a nice amount of contrast around about there. Now we have a few other really useful tools for controlling and boosting color. If we go to the HSL panel here, this gives us three options here: hue, saturation, and luminance. So we could target saturation here, and then we can either use these 8 color sliders to boost the saturation of these different color ranges within the image, or we could use this little target tool here, and then we can click and drag over colors in the image. So I could click and drag upwards over the blues in the image here, and you can see now I'm increasing the saturation of the blues and the purple. Similarly, I could click over the center point here in the flower to increase the saturation of the magentas. We might also want to target luminance, and then I can click and drag to change the brightness of colors within the image. So I could perhaps just drag down very slightly on those greens in the background, and maybe go to saturation and drag up to boost the yellows and greens in the background as well. You need to be careful here that we don't start to see sort of hard edges appear between our colors, which we're seeing over here a little bit. So I might want to just go back to luminance and tweak things to reduce that slightly. And finally, one other excellent tool for boosting colors is the adjustment brush. We can grab that from the toolbar over here, and we just need to paint over an area to target it. So I could just paint over the central part of the flower here. I can hit O to view the mask overlay, which shows me exactly where I've painted. So I'm going to paint over that area, and then I can use the settings here. I'll hit O again to hide the overlay, and I can perhaps just boost the saturation in that area. I can boost the contrast as well, perhaps tweak the exposure. So you can see we can target and adjust different areas of the image like this. Now, if I wanted to zero in on those purpley magenta tones there, what I can do is use range masking down here. I can set this to color, and then I can use the little eyedropper here to sample the colors here. And I can hold shift to sample more than one color. And if I hit O now, you can see I'm only targeting those purples in the center part of the flower. So that's another really useful way to target and boost individual colors within your image. And if I bring up a before and after view here, you can see the difference a few color changes can make. So there we go, that's how to boost colors in Lightroom.